Want to hear what's probably going to happen in 2021? You should just watch The Simpsons. I'm pretty sure the writers for the long-running animated show aren't actual people, but rather time travelers from the future sent to warn us of what's to come without telling us up front in order to preserve the space-time continuum. Hey, if you have a better explanation for their wild theories that shockingly turned out true, I'd love to hear it. But it's not always The Simpsons predicting the future. Other TV shows have done it too. How did Scrubs know where Osama bin Laden was? Did Star Trek predict the iPad? And what other big things did The Simpsons predict? All that and more right now.
Oh, do you realize what's happening?
The Simpsons has a long history of predicting a ton of wild and crazy things that turned out to be true. I guess that's what happens when you've been on the air for 674 years, right? Some of the stuff you say is bound to happen eventually, but the idea that The Simpsons could predict the future started off as a fun little joke that no one really took seriously. A lot of them were minor things that people could laugh at, like Lady Gaga's Super Bowl outfit. But then there were the big instances that turned a lot of heads. Obviously, the biggest was predicting Donald Trump would be president. That's right, in a 2000 episode, which, to make you feel really old, was over 20 years ago at this point. Wowza, right? Well, in that episode, titled Bart to the Future, we get a flash forward where Lisa becomes president. Makes sense so far, right? I mean, how could she be anything but president in the future? Well, the more important thing is who she takes over for. The previous president is Donald Trump, which at the time was just an outlandish and comical joke the writers thought would be funny.
As you know, we've inherited quite a budget crunch from President Trump.
Well, if you flash forward 16 years, we all know what happened. So now the real thing is looking to The Simpsons to see what will happen in 2021. And let me tell you, the results aren't pretty. In the annual Treehouse of Horror, The Simpsons predict that there will basically be a country-ending war after the January 20th inauguration. Let's hope this one time they're wrong, okay? Sports ball teams, listen up. I've discovered the secret of winning one of those championship thingies most people in sports want to win. Just have a popular sitcom predicted for you. That's what happened in the truly bizarre coincidence that happened in Parks and Rec's final season. As I'm sure we all know because we're all huge TV fans here, Parks and Rec had a big time jump in their final season. It jumped ahead 3 years into the future, and a lot of the humor was derived from the show, informing us of the incredible bonker things that happened during the jump. For example, they said things like the Game of Thrones finale had Khaleesi marrying Jack Sparrow. Crazy, right? Well, honestly, that would have been a much better ending than the one we got, right? Anyways, they also had a joke that during the 3-year time jump, the Chicago Cubs won the World Series.
And obviously everyone's in a really great mood now because of the Cubs winning the series.
This was funny because the Cubs hadn't won a World Series in 108 years. But then something bizarre happened. The very next year after that episode came out, the Cubs' curse was broken, and against all odds, they won the World Series. Wow. The janitor was always the wisest character on Scrubs. Okay, fine, that's not true. He paid me $10 to say that, okay? But the truth is that the janitor was certainly someone people should have listened to more. Because most of what came out of his mouth was either a straight-up lie or a gross exaggeration, I understand that not a lot of people would want to truly listen to what he had to say. But if they did, they might have found one of the world's most notorious terrorists much faster. Osama bin Laden had been in hiding for years, and as we're all aware, he was found in 2011 in Pakistan, which was a surprising piece of information. But the janitor knew all along.
In my opinion, we should be looking for bin Laden in Pakistan.
It's played off as a quirky joke from a character who's known for saying insane things, but in this case, he was 100% right. Sometimes shows predicting the future made for a good laugh, but other times they're devastatingly tragic. That's what happened in this next entry, where a show not only predicted the death of famed basketball player Kobe Bryant, but also was surprisingly and shockingly accurate in how the pro athlete met his untimely demise. In the short-lived but moderate critical success Legends of Chamberlain Heights that aired on Comedy Central, dark humor was aplenty. This was no more apparent in the Kobe Bryant joke, where the basketball player's helicopter crashed right in front of the main characters, and before anyone can do anything to save him, the helicopter blows up. And of course, a helicopter crash is what ultimately killed Kobe in real life. The episode aired in 2016, whereas Kobe died in 2020, which is pretty bizarre when you think about it. Obviously, out of respect, Comedy Central has removed the episode with that bit in it. And given how everything went down, it sounds like the most respectful thing to do overall. So no one told you life was gonna be this way. Well, actually that's not entirely true, because the beloved sitcom Friends did in fact tell you just how life was going to be when it predicted the rise of Facebook before the social media site became an actual thing. Back in 2003, in the episode The One with the Memorial Service, Ross tells his friends about a new website that was specifically designed for college students and help people, as Ross puts it.
It's cool. You can post messages for people, let everyone know what you're up to.
$50 to the person who can guess which character made a sarcastic and snarky comment about it. That's right, the answer is obviously Chandler.
Oh, great, a faster way to tell people that I'm unemployed and childless.
Well, Facebook presented itself as something eerily similar to that idea just 1 year later. Sure, you could argue that this idea of an online web application to keep up with old friends was inevitable given the current market at that time, or you could go with my theory, which is 5 times more awesome. I think that Mark Zuckerberg is really just a massive Friends superfan. He binges seasons in entire days and only bought his HBO Max subscription to watch Friends and nothing else. But obviously, Zuckerberg saw this episode, got his brilliant idea, and a year later, boom! Now we all have Facebook and can keep in touch with the people we want to talk to, while also ignoring old family members we've been trying to avoid. Because it's a show about trekking the stars, you would imagine Star Trek to have plenty of fancy sci-fi and futuristic gadgets. Like, it wouldn't be much of a futuristic space show if we saw everyone talking on corded rotary phones, would it? No. So that's why it's funny to see what types of gadgets people thought the future should have and compare that to what we actually got. A lot of Trekkies out there will know that Star Trek The Next Generation had its characters use a PAD, P-A-D-D, which is a personal access display device. It was a touchscreen computer tablet with no keyboard. It was flat and had rounded corners. You look at that back then and you think how amazing that piece of technology is. You look at it today and it just looks like a cheap version of an iPad. Star Trek predicted the future would be these touch-based screens. And although they were correct, they probably had no idea just how quickly touchscreen computer tablets would expand over the coming years. Arrested Development's 4th season may not be as critically beloved as its first 3, but I think it certainly has its highlights. It's also worth noting that a major plot point in this 4th season had a lot of future real-life parallels. The biggest had to be the storyline about the border wall.
Yes, write down that I did that.
In the show, George Bluth Sr. gets a contract to build a wall across the US and Mexico border, but also ultimately doesn't plan to finish the project. Shenanigans ensue naturally, and the whole thing goes horribly wrong. You can tie that to the current situation we're in all you want. And I'll just say something about that sounds awfully familiar, doesn't it? Oh, right. The whole idea behind a border wall around the two countries became a major talking point 3 years later in the 2016 election. Well, it just goes to show how similar George Bluth and Donald Trump are in their methods, which isn't the best thing. But let's be fair, the whole world is starting to feel like an Arrested Development episode. Quantum Leap was a time-traveling show that saw Scott Bakula play a character who jumped into people's bodies in different time periods to help fix problems. Yes, it's one of those timey-wimey shows about the future, but it also made some fun predictions that turned out to be surprisingly accurate in small ways. In a 1990 episode, Bakula's Dr. Sam Beckett jumps to 1996, where the Super Bowl is being played. The character casually mentions that the Pittsburgh Steelers are 3 points behind. Well, the writers of that episode must have felt pretty special because 6 years later, the Steelers did actually play in the Super Bowl in '96 against the Dallas Cowboys. And they were even losing by 3 points at one point in the game. That's pretty cool. Time to go back and watch all of Quantum Leap now to see what other small things I should be on the lookout for. Can Chris Rock tell the future? Or is he just a funny comedian who has a knack for understanding the absurdity of horrible situations? You be the judge. Way back in 1999, Rock was starring on his own HBO show called, you guessed it, The Chris Rock Show. It was a sketch show, and one of his funniest sketches was one that saw Rock talking about his past guests, one of which was O.J. Simpson, the infamous former football player. Rock joked that Simpson left behind an instructional video called I Didn't Kill My Wife, but if I did, here's how I'd do it. That title is absurd, but Simpson must have been watching and for some reason got the crazy idea to actually do something similar. He published a hypothetical confession in 2007 with a book called If I Did It. That's insane. Plus, I prefer Rock's title for it, don't you? It just rolls off the tongue better. It's incredible to go back and watch the 1960s show The Jetsons to see what the family of the future predicted about the actual future. Maybe the most interesting thing amongst all the cool gizmos and gadgets was the flat screen TVs. Sure, you see flat screen TVs now and barely bat an eye, but imagine the wonder back in the 60s about such a far out concept. TVs back then were the complete opposite of flat screens and were rather chunky bricks that took up a lot of space. Well, luckily, as the world advanced, we didn't have to wait until the Jetsons time period before we upgraded and actually got flat-screen TVs. I mean, now I couldn't imagine a world without them, could you? Next up, here's hoping robot dogs become a permanent thing. I'm just saying, if The Simpsons said September 2021 had giant mosquitoes rise up from the earth and take over, I'd start buying more bug spray, wouldn't you? Whoever said TV was bad for you obviously didn't know it could also predict the future, right? So go watch more TV, kids.